So, as I'm sure many of you have heard, the Supreme Court recently ruled that affirmative action is not constitutional in the United States.
It's a long time coming. I mean,
Yeah. This ruling, I guess, was more targeted at the universities of Harvard and actually the University of North Carolina, UNC,
oh,
were the
okay.
two that were focused.
So it's actually hitting close to home.
It is hitting close to home here in North Carolina, and we've known this in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, what it's saying is that you can't judge people in their entrance to college or universities based on their race. Which,
So is this solely focused on academic institutions?
yes,
Not because I guess you can't, step into the private sphere with that kind of stuff. You can't
Yes.
dictate how.
it is a private company, is right, but because these are, well, I don't know about Harvard, but I mean, UNC is a public institution. I mean, it's funded by state money,
Yeah.
and so they said, yeah, it's specifically their programs, but it's setting a constitutional precedent that colleges and universities can't. So I guess Harvard is like the private example, and UNC would be making education equal rights. It violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So equal protection under law. Because basically, for those of you that don't really understand what affirmative action was, it was basically a way to promote diversity of race in schools and in jobs. It's used a lot in the industry as well. But it basically made it to where Asian students had to score the highest on tests, then white students, then black students, and then actually, I believe Native American and Latino students were actually had to score lower. So it's basically, it enshrined into law that black people are not as smart as white people.
Yeah, it incentivizes mediocrity in a way.
It's racist in a way.
That's one of the main arguments I've heard against the idea of affirmative action in the academic field is that it creates this stigma, in trying to address racism, it creates a stigma against black students, wherein if you're going to one of these institutions, if you're going to one of these universities and you see a black student, in your head you're immediately going to think, oh, you didn't get here on the basis of your merit, you got here because of a handout.
Exactly.
Same with any other minority group.
Well, then in the opposite direction, it also for Asian students, it was much harder for them to get into college because of their race.
Yeah.
And for the idea for someone to say that you're combating racism by being racist
Exactly.
is ridiculous. That's a common thing used by the modern left. They say it's the whole idea behind reparations. It's that we should punish white people, most of which didn't own slaves, and like my family wasn't even here.
Exactly.
My family came here in the 50s. It's the
about
idea
half and half,
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, yeah. You can't combat racism with racism. It just doesn't work. You perpetuate the cycle. Somewhere it has to stop, and that's why I think this is a beautiful ruling, taking race out of the equation. I've always thought it's weird that on an application, in a country where we say race doesn't matter, I have to list my race.
Yeah.
Why do you need that data? If you're not taking my race into account when you're hiring me or accepting me to a university, then why do you need to know it?
It should be on the basis of your merit, on the basis of your academic performance. That would also incentivize people on the lower end, like the earlier end of education. It would incentivize people to both invest more time, energy, and resources into public education from grade school through high school, because
which is what should be done.
Yes, exactly. Because if you set up a program that basically, I don't want to say guarantees, but it facilitates African American and Latino and Native American students in getting into higher education without having the necessary academic background, the necessary academic skills to take on that responsibility.
Making the problem worse.
Yeah, you're making the problem worse. And you're also there's no incentivization to actually condition children at a young age to be able to perform well in those institutions. So you have a failing on one end, and then once you get into the institution, you have, like I mentioned before, that constant antagonism between, it creates more racial tension between the white students who feel like they had to work harder to get here, and the black students who, through all intents and purposes, they might be completely worthy of being there. They might be,
But they don't now. How do they know? How can they feel
exactly.
like
They can't know that. So they're dealing with did I just get, was my position here a handout, or did I deserve it? And also all of these other students think that it was a handout regardless of my, position. So and
it kind of just gets us away from the fact that why are black students scoring less? You don't just say, oh, they are going to score less, so let's just make it easier for them to get in. You have to combat the reason why. I mean, when we look, I think the number one reason is the lack of the two-parent household. I mean, we see that in African Americans is much higher, the lack of fathers in the household. Yeah. And that leads to, less college admittance, lower college admittance. It leads to like higher crime rates, high rates of suicide,
I was going to say
homicide.
Higher drug uses too.
Exactly.
You know, the shattering of the family, that's your first safety net when it comes to addiction and things like that. If you don't have that, then you're going to be more prone to those things.
And instead of state incentivization of family and of being in school and of forming a cohesive unit to support this child, we tell the child that it's okay. You don't have to try. You'll get into college anyways because you're black. Mm-hmm. You're separating people by race. And I know there's a lot of people in this country that because of this are going to say that this is a racist ruling. I've already heard people saying it. Mm-hmm. The idea that choosing to treat different, and I like to say ethnicities over race because race is a weird word to me, but treating different ethnicities differently based on their ethnicity is inherently racist.
It's like you said, and like what I said earlier, where you're assuming through enacting these programs that black children are less capable.
Yes.
You know, instead of...
You're ranking races.
Yes, you're saying, you know, the Asian supremacy.
Asians are smarter, which, I mean, statistically they do better. That doesn't mean they're more intelligent.
They also have stronger families, though.
That's the thing.
They have a more authoritarian family structure that incentivizes that.
I used to work for a Chinese immigrant. I mean, he was a college professor of mine. I worked in his lab, and that's one thing he talked about to me. I had a conversation with him about, I was like, I have to have a job. I need to work in order to pay to go to school.
Yeah.
Because he was offering me a position that I just couldn't live off of the money that I would have been making. It would have been great for my career. And he said, I don't understand that about Americans. That he was like, what will your parents, would they not pay for you to live while you do this? And I was like, no, like that's just, no, I have to pay my own bills. I'm an adult now. And he said, no, like, and his children and Chinese children and most Asian children, he said they pay for them till they're 30 or they live at home. That education is the most important thing. Yeah. They will starve so their child can go to a tutor to make a better grade.
Exactly.
And it's that delayed gratification that they can do.
It's also a problem with the, you know, I think this is probably a tangent, but there's a problem with the way that American culture views college, in that for a lot of Americans, it's not a pathway towards a higher position. It's a life experience. It's a fun time. So that's why, you know, as adults raising children, when you send your kid off to college, you do expect them to go. Yeah, if you're gonna go have this fun experience, you're gonna pay for it. Maybe not on the tuition level, because a lot of people's parents do cover their tuition. A lot of people get scholarships, yada yada yada.
But the purpose is not to learn. The purpose is to have fun.
Yeah, but in terms of rent, I mean, we live in a college town, so we both have experienced, you know, adults that have all of the freedoms of adulthood and are going to school and still have their rent and utilities covered by their parents.
Yes.
And it's more so infantilizing. It's more so like detrimental to their development than just living with your parents and being
We think we're teaching our children to become financially stable, but through that, in this period, they're not. And if that's something you accept, that I want to just go ahead and start working, because there's a certain honor to that as well.
Oh yeah.
But if you're gonna say that it's because of an Asian person's race that they're doing better, and not the fact that their culture is different, and that they actually supported their child getting educated and doing better on tests, that's something they value. Look at what they're doing and do that. Don't make it to where it's not equality of outcome, it's equality of opportunity. You know,
you all have the same chance. It's not that you have the same results.
But there was a U.S. general that was saying that they were going to appoint their next like chief of staff or whatever based on they were going to appoint a minority, and then we needed more minorities in the military, and that they were asked by an interviewer, would you hire a less qualified candidate?
Oh, I've heard this interview.
Would you hire a less qualified candidate just because they're a minority? And they said, of course. And so even in the military, we've got this idea that we'll take, like, people don't have to try hard. All you have to do is identify that we've now taken everything but race and identity out of the equation. We have now become inherently, like, just as racist as we were in, like, the slavery era of America.
It's just kind of flipped on its head.
We've literally assigned attributes to races and identities and genders. And we've created a society built on race.
That's one of the things that's always, again, this is probably a total tangent, but we're talking about, you know, kind of the modern day racism versus like the older form of racism. That's one of the things that's, living in the South, you interact with a lot of old white people who are racist. They have racial prejudice. But it's not a racism of like, the kind of like hateful racism that it's just an acceptance that there are differences between people.
And they'll say, I don't like their culture.
Yeah.
Because we both have probably racist grandfathers. Or,
oh, yeah.
Or, because anyone at that age that's lived in the South has a racist tendency.
Yes.
But even my grandfather, who's passed now, but he wasn't exactly the least racist person in the world, we'll say. But if there was a hardworking African American man that was an honorable, noble man,
yeah,
my grandfather showed him nothing but respect because
exactly.
he cared more about the content of the character. Yes, he might not get along with the average black person, and that was what most people would call him being racist.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a very the cultural differences back then between African Americans and white Americans were much more vast than they are today.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to get into too. It's a racism that it's based on the acknowledgement of concrete difference. It's not a assumption that the other party is incapable. You know, it's like my my grandfather, racist, but he would never say, oh, this person isn't capable of work. This person isn't capable of being a moral person or a good member of society, yada, yada, yada. He's just, like you said, he doesn't like the culture. He likes his culture, and he doesn't want to adopt the other.
So, to get off of our tangent, one thing that needs to be addressed in regards to this is that this was done by the Supreme Court. A lot of people get tied up in the executive branch and the legislative branch, and they think that that's the sum of American politics and American legislation. But the Supreme Court in the past year and a half, as far as from a conservative point of view, has done more work than either of those branches. Mm-hmm. They've overturned Roe v. Wade and now enshrined that affirmative action is racist and unconstitutional. And those were done by way of, a candidate, Trump. A lot of people like to say, well, what did he get done in his presidency? He has now ensured that for the foreseeable future,
mm-hmm. until these Supreme Court justices die.
Yeah, arguably the most powerful branch today in the American government, the Supreme Court, is a conservative body.
Yeah,
and that's beautiful for us conservatives.
It points out, and we were talking about this in private earlier, the failing of the American legal system, and Putin has pointed this out about the American legal system as well. The idea of term limits for the executive branch is very counterproductive towards actually getting anything done. It's like you have a system in this country. You have a system where, at max, the party in power is going to be in power for 8 years, and then they're going to hand all of the things that they've done over to their enemy party, over to the enemy. So, what incentive do they have to actually do good? What incentive do they have to actually accomplish things that are productive when they know that they're going to hand whatever mess they leave over to the opposing party?
Yeah, that's a common theme we see in American politics, especially in the executive branch. We like to blame these presidents for things that happen, but really any change you enact as a president is not going to take effect for at least 4 more years.
Exactly.
So it's normally we're seeing the effects of one presidency in the next presidency. And it kind of, it alleviates the responsibility to one's actions as a president. Even over 8 years, things that Obama put into action are just now coming to fruition. And it's he's gone. Yeah. There's no recourse anymore. It's not like you can punish him now. You can't impeach him. And that's why the Supreme Court is so beautiful. You put these people into power, and you have to really think about who you're putting into power when they're going to be there for the rest of their lives.
And they also have to think about their decisions more. They have to think about, because they are going to be held accountable for those decisions for the rest of their lives. It's not a situation wherein they could just be like, oh, well, I'll like what Obama did basically, where it's once my term is done, I can basically drop off the face of the earth and never be held accountable for any of my actions ever again. They're in there for the rest of their lives, and thus they are in public view for, holding the responsibility for the decisions that they make.
And it's the same to say about, congressional seats and presidents, even if they aren't reaching their term limit, a lot of times, the only reason they get elected or get nominated is based on the support of the party. Mm-hmm. In when you put someone in a position where they're going to be there for the rest of their lives, they don't need party support anymore.
Yeah.
They don't need campaign donations. They're not campaigning anymore. They have the job. They have the seat. Mm-hmm. They don't have to worry about getting reelected. And a lot of presidents and a lot of congressional candidates, they do things just so they can get reelected. They care more about that than the actual principles they might have ran on.
It creates a more temporal political structure wherein you're not thinking about the long term. You're thinking about getting votes in the immediate moment and then using that power that you're granted for the limited time that you have to lubricate your political party for the next time around.
Exactly.
It's just kind of That's
more of a game than it should be.
That's part of what the culture war is, in my opinion. It's not so much substantive politics. It's not so much the literal, like, these are the issues that matter the most to the people espousing them on both sides, left and right. It's that's the most visceral thing that can get people into the voting booth, that can get people, because you lay out this long-term, like, 10-year economic plan of revitalizing the nation's industry. That doesn't turn heads because it's such a long, drawn out process, and the chances of it actually being accomplished are very slim when you can't even be in power for that length of time.
So we play this game of this pendulum swing where, I mean, essentially we're not getting anywhere, I mean, it's this guy makes a decision and 4 years later another guy just repeals that decision. It's like Obamacare. Like, what did that really accomplish? I mean, it's still kind of around, but I mean, Trump got into office.
You see the signs on the side of the road. I don't really understand it.
I don't either. I mean, everybody has private insurance, and most people do. I think this is a good sign for conservative America. I would like to say, along with this, a lot of recent statistical data, I think I talked to you about this, that Gen Z is now arguably one of the most conservative generations we have now. And it's actually increasing in conservatism. The only generation we actually see becoming more liberal is boomers.
That makes sense.
That does make sense at this age. I mean, we're seeing a pushback from young people. That, like, we see church attendance is rising drastically, like exponentially. Conservative views. Women like espousing old feminist ideals instead of this new neo-feminist movement.
The trad wife.
The trad wife. That was offensive 3 years ago. Even now it's offensive to a lot of people. But the idea of that, like, stay-at-home motherhood is becoming a large thing. Homeschooling, and we're getting to the point where even in North Carolina we're going to have educational vouchers. Because so many people want to send their kids to Christian schools. It's beautiful. And I know the left is saying that it's white supremacy and racism rising and neo-fascism. No, it's people just wanting to have a family and not have their children attacked. And
exactly. With the homeschooling thing, as someone with a child, it's just wanting to be able to, and it sounds, to someone who doesn't have children, it's going to sound like, oh, you want to control your child. But yes, I want to control the things that get put into my child's brain. I want to
protect your child.
Yes, I don't want people to influence it. Just like how I don't want my child hanging out with people who do drugs because I don't want them influencing his behavior. I don't want him going to public school because I don't want them influencing his behavior.
Left or right. You don't want someone putting their politics on your child or their ideologies. And I think it's been a beautiful change in America. And I think honestly we're seeing it in a lot of places globally now. I think that it's a glimmer of hope for us conservatives. We've kind of had this idea that it's just lost. And I think the left perpetuates that idea. Because they have this belief that the final swing of American politics is just the left, and they had this moment with Obama, and now that, like, Biden got elected, but specifically with Obama, they were like, we've won, it's over now. The conservatives,
the
are
end
gone.
Of history.
Yeah, the end of history.
Yeah.
We are liberalism has finally come to fruition, and now everybody can be happy.
Yeah, now it's just a war against the rest of the world to establish it globally.
Yes, but no. You don't just get to just win.
Yeah.
Most people are conservative in this country, and that's something that they're gonna have to contend with. And conservatives are getting angry. And I think a lot of that idea that the left grew was because, like we've talked about before, like those libertarian ideals of the early 2000s of Republicans. When you have libertarianism and you take your conservative ideas out of the social framework and you limit the government to a point where it can't do anything, liberalism thrives. Liberalism thrives in anarchy. Anarchy is liberal as it comes.
This quote always stuck with me. The side that wants to be left alone will always lose to the side that wants to win. And that's the dilemma that conservatives have been facing for the past probably 20 years in this country.
You can't just get a cabin in the woods.
Yes, the conservatives want to be left alone. And I want to be left alone too. But I recognize that the only way to be left alone is to win. And the liberals, they don't want to be left alone. They don't want to leave you alone. They want to win. Yeah. That's why they've been winning. But I think conservatives, especially with Trump, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Trump signaled a shift from the kind of libertarian Tea Party republicanism that was popular under Obama to a strong nationalist sentiment that, the government should be strong and it should do things on the behalf of the American people. That's becoming more popular. That's becoming, like you said, there's a pendulum swing almost I would say it's stabilizing towards the middle, where both sides have an attitude of, we want to win. We want to gain dominance over the state apparatus to do what we want to do with it.
And I think that's we have to. And I think we see that in a lot of other constitutional amendments with conservatives, the way we look at them, like particularly with free speech. So this is an opinion that a lot of conservatives wouldn't agree with me on.
Okay.
I'm not a free speech absolutist.
I would agree.
I don't think you have the right to come up to my child and scream things in their face and like say nasty words to them. Because I think the founding fathers agreed with this. They don't want lewd behavior, and that's why for a lot of American history we were against pornography. It's like there's not just complete freedom of expression. There's time and place.
Yeah.
It's like you can't just fly a Nazi flag in a public square. I mean, it's like you can't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's to a point. Freedom of speech.
I also don't believe that you should be able, like you said with the. And this is something that other conservative commentators have taken a very weird position on. I know Matt Walsh has gone on the record saying that he opposes like hate speech laws and the labeling of hate crime. I don't agree with that. I think that, there should be limits to the things you could say in public discourse, especially if they have the potential to incite real violence against other people.
And I know that that's a very touchy subject, and that's something that's hard to do. But there are certain things that shouldn't be said. I'm not going to go into I don't say we should go into your house and tell you what you can say in the comfort of your own home and in your private, or even if you want to write it in a book. But there should be places, like you shouldn't be able to go out to where my children can be, and it goes back to what a lot of Americans agree on, protecting our children. You shouldn't be able to go into my children's school. You shouldn't be able to like walk down the street and scream and shake your boobs and do all these crazy things. There is a point, and no, you can't just be a libertarian about anything. You're right. If the side that wants to be left alone will lose to the side that wants to win.
Exactly.
And we have to want to win as Republicans or as conservatives. You know, you have to fight back, and we have to play the game. And I hate to say it, but statistically, we are more intelligent than most left-wing people. I mean, that's why you see in a lot of these debates. I mean, you see that's the idea. That's what I say to a lot of young conservatives I meet is, if you're right, you're gonna win the argument. And they're going to get angry. Let them get angry. Sit there and speak your mind. To go back to Matt Walsh, that's the idea behind that whole segment he has, the Change My Mind segment. He's going to sit down and he says, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. That's what conservatives should say, you know, and win the argument. But you have to have the argument.
Yeah, you have to have that confrontation.
And we've been afraid almost to even speak our mind. Like even with this podcast, you know, I mean, there's that part of me deep down that's wrong for saying this, but that is a little afraid of what people might think about my ideas. And why do I have to feel like that?
Exactly.
I'm saying that I want to protect my children and praise God. And that's a fascist idea now in America.
Yes.
Racist, fascist, bigoted idea. To love God and to want people to be happier.
You're literally a Nazi.
We're all Nazis, man. Nazi is it's a plague, man.
Yeah, it's Biden said it was the white supremacy was the biggest threat to America. Which is almost as schizophrenic as DeSantis saying the Chinese Communist Party is the biggest threat to America.
We need a return to normalcy in this country.
Yes.
And I think that normalcy for a long time was seen as wrong. Like even Elon Musk has started to do this. I don't know if you saw with Twitter. He's making... So there's a list of things that are slurs. And he's not saying you can't say this, but there's things like the N-word. If I went to a black person's page and continually said it, I could get banned on Twitter. Which, I agree.
Yeah,
that's when it becomes hate speech and it's you're antagonizing someone. And the word cis is now listed as a slur word. And his reasoning was... They're normal people. We don't want to.
You're making a slur for the normal person.
You can't marginalize normal people. That's not the. And they're trying to marginalize. And the whole idea of the cis white man and like the oppressed woman who's just a mother. Like you can't creating these terms that make it sound wrong to be just a normal, happy, well-adjusted human being is why so many young children don't want to be a happy, healthy, well-adjusted human being. Yeah,
it incentivizes, and it goes back almost all the way to like the 60s counterculture, wherein the being weird, being different, being outside the...
Not being a square.
Yeah, not being a square, being, a little bit freaky is the thing that is cool. And you have a generation, like in the 60s, that wasn't normal. Like, they were actually being weird.
They were the
But then, you have our parents' generation where they kind of saw that as like, oh, those are the cool old people. You know, those
Yeah.
are the old people that I actually like. And then now everybody's like that. Everybody's different.
Now, but if you say I want to get married and have children, I told someone the other day I wanted to have 5 kids, and they were like, "What is wrong with you?"
Mm-hmm. It's insane.
Why do you want to have kids? The idea, if you talk about marriage, is it's this obscene idea nowadays. But like I said, the younger generation is coming back around to these ideas. They're reading the Bible. Bible sales are up. Church attendance is up. Conservative ideas are up. People are going to the gym again. People are exercising. They're actually caring about their health. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful time.
RFK is doing push-ups on
push-ups
camera.
in the sun, and I mean, what a thirst trap! The first presidential thirst trap I've ever seen. I think. if he doesn't win,
that'll go down.
He'll go down in history for that.
Yeah.
The first. I mean, has there been?
Do you think that is the first presidential candidate that has done push-ups publicly?
I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, maybe. I could see him doing something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, like recorded.
No, I think so. Yes. I mean, not one that I can remember doing.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I've never seen a president knock out some push-ups.
He's got the riz.
He does,
as the children would say.
I regret saying that he had no sauce in that one episode because he must have heard what I said,
and he's been working on
his sauce.
He went on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah.
I mean, he is talking to this younger generation, and he is a new kind of in a bipartisan country, I'm a conservative, but I want a respectful person. It's kind of like the movie The Kingdom of Heaven.
Okay.
Saladin. Like, he went out and he, like, Baldwin, the leper, they had this respect between them. Saladin was like, screw you, you're wrong, but you're honorable. You know? Like, I think that...
And you can have that fight, you can have that confrontation on the grounds of an honorable... mutual acknowledgement.
That at least I know that you're going to fight this fight with honor, you know, and you're not going to be. And then when Baldwin the leper died, I think it was like Jean-Luc or something, some French guy who started like massacring Muslims, and Saladin was like, well now we're not fighting this fair fight. There's got to be that gentleman's agreement, and I think RFK could be the new kind of Democrat that could do that because we need both sides. There needs to be a this and that.
There needs to be a dialogue.
There needs to be a dialectic and a dialogue. Yeah. And that's a Democrat that I would, not support, but...
I would rather him than the other guy.
Yeah, he's the lesser of all of the evils right now, you know?
And that's one of the things...
Tulsi Gabbard, too. Like, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is a great example of that.
She is a Democrat, isn't she?
She's a Democrat, yeah.
But
from
a
Hawaii.
Respectable one.
Very respectable.
Yeah.
Was served in the U.S. military after 9/11.
She was in the National Guard.
She did 3 tours, I think.
Yeah.
As an Army medic. She served. More than there's some people that are active duty that didn't. Serve 3 tours.
Absolutely.
And I respect her so much.
She's in the reserves. Let me correct.
Yeah, in the reserves. Yeah, but she left her. She was already a politician who left to serve.
Actually serve her country.
Yeah, didn't have to. She chose. She elected to. I think the second 2 tours, and so she knows about these things, policy, and she has this respect for Republicans. She goes on. She went on Cam Haines' interview. He's a hardcore Christian conservative, and they're like best friends. They go bow hunting together and all kinds of stuff.
Well, she was at the But continue.
But no, that's what we need, and that's why I like RFK.
She was at the Rage Against the War Machine rally that was in D.C. I think it was in February, with a bunch of, it had people from the left, people from the right, and it was a pretty big rally, and it was united around the cause of we shouldn't be sending all this money to Ukraine. We shouldn't be involving ourselves in these foreign conflicts. You had veteran speakers. Jackson Hinkle was up there. He's a communist. And Tulsi Gabbard was there. Some people from the Libertarian Party were there.
Yes,
it's fucking.
That's the future of America. That's
who's fucking. Who? What's his fucking name? He's the dude from the bass guy from Pink Floyd. The guy who's
Roger Waters.
Yes, Roger Waters.
He's got a lot of opinions. He thinks that Taiwan should be part of China.
Roger Waters. I don't like Pink Floyd, and that's something I've gotten flack for my whole life. But Roger Waters has been hitting it,
and he's lost a lot of fans because of his views and speaking. But I think that on that point, my final touch on that point is I think that in this election, that new era of American politics, which is kind of fleshing out right now, is highlighted between Trump and RFK. They mirror each other in ways, and they both hate the CIA, and so at the very least,
that's one of the most important policies.
That is, and that's why both of them. Like, I'm not saying I like everything RFK does. I'm not saying I like everything Trump does, but they both have things they disagree on, but they both represent some of these core ideas that most Americans, if you asked most Americans if we should dismantle the CIA and uncover these things and stop them doing what they're doing in other countries, they would all agree. And that's what we need in American politics. Yes, we can argue about these far right and far left topics, but there is that moderate America that like 80 to 90% of us all agree on.
Exactly.
We need to get that done.
Yeah.
Screw the CIA.
Nobody wants war. Nobody wants to get spied on.
Exactly. And no one wants to start wars in other countries.
Yeah.